So project communications, the purpose of this presentation is to go through some of the communications requirements and strategies that you will use during the course of your project and throughout that project's life cycle. Communication starts in PMBOK on page 243 in chapter 10. Communications tends to be thought of as usually quite a simple linear process where person A talks to person B, but there's a whole bunch of things that we need to consider. And sometimes it's not actually you telling other people, it's actually you giving them the opportunity to tell you something. So it's actually the listening side of it, not the provision of information. So you know that we're going to do a communication plan. There'll be some other things we go through during the course of this presentation, including push and pull and what noises, etc., etc. So the purpose of a communication strategy or a communication plan is to enable the work on your project to be undertaken on an ongoing basis while you have stakeholders in the background. Okay, but what you want to be able to do is basically put a buffer between the work and the stakeholders and only have the what, who, how, when happening in between and communication between those two parties in a controlled manner. You don't want it necessarily to be happening ad hoc by whomever to whomever, otherwise you end up with an unguided missile that will actually burn somebody, which is usually going to be the project manager. So we want this buffer, but we want the communication to happen, but we want it to happen in a controlled manner. So this is the who, what, where. So normally we have who you want to talk, what you want them to talk about, when they're going to do it. You're going to undertake project tasks. You're going to review those tasks on an ongoing basis. You're going to hear, you're going to tell a story, then you're going to listen, and of course it all ends up talking to one another. And so what you need is you need control. Okay, if you don't have control over those things, then somebody is going to say the wrong thing to the wrong person. That person is going to tell the next person. You end up with Chinese whispers and the whole thing turns to custard. So the reason we have controlled communications in a project is to mitigate risk. Okay, so you don't want information that's confidential, for example, in a project to be released before its time or to the wrong parties or to the wrong person. But it's also to mitigate risk in the way that you find information out into your project about something that may occur before it does occur. So you're actually managing, you're actually finding out what's going on so you can control it before it becomes a really serious issue within the project. You want to control the impact as well. So if you find out about things in advance that could potentially happen, what you're doing is you're going to plan for it, and then you'll be able, it's not such a rude shock when something big does happen because you're already half prepared for it. So it's a cycle. It's not just one direction. It's not just from the project out. It's also giving those stakeholders outside your project the opportunity to contribute as well. So as I mentioned before, you want to be able to anticipate what's going on and plan around it, and you want to be able to close your project ultimately with happy stakeholders. In most scopes you will end up with critical success factors listed in your scope, and some of those success factors should relate to the satisfaction of the stakeholders that have been impacted by or have been involved in your project. So what you want to be able to control is who talks to who, basically. Because if you've got levels of infrastructure in your project, so you've got team members, you've got project managers, you've got sponsors, etc., you don't want somebody from the team talking to the sponsor unless they've been given the right to do that. Because if they ring up to whinge about something or they ring up to tell tales on somebody, it completely disempowers everybody else in the cycle. So you want to be able to turn and say, you can talk to that person, you can talk to that person. If you want to make a complaint about your team member, you come by me, it goes up the chain down the other side. However you want to do it, whatever works for you, but you make sure you predetermine what it is and who's going to talk to whom. So it's when. Quite often you know that one of the simplest and most common forms of communication in a project is a weekly project meeting, which is where you have status reports coming in. You sit down in a group, usually in the middle of the week. You have a group hug, you go through your status reports, you come up with the minutes and you come up with the action items. Then everyone goes and updates the risk register or the issue register or the work breakdown structure or whatever, all the outputs from that particular meeting. But it's when you do these things. So after that meeting, once per week, you might send out an external stakeholders report, for example, or it might just be an email that you send out to certain people who get an update as to what the outcome of the meeting was or where you're at or what the issues were. It might be that you send a once a week copy of the issue register to certain people. It just depends on the project and the stakeholders and what their issues are and what they want. So obviously it's what you're going to send them, how they're going to receive it. So we'll talk about a little about different methods of communication, etc. in a moment, but usually this relates to how you're going to deliver what it is, the message, the communications to the recipient. So it's obviously their receipt, it's the distribution point, and an archive reference. Now communications are really important if you ever, again I keep on going back, if you end up in court for any reason, but the communications are really important that you manage whatever communications you're sending out and you've got a long-term referral or archive of them. The biggest risk when it comes to communications is email. Because everyone goes, email, wordy, send, and it's whether that email, we had quite a discussion on Monday night as to whether an email is a legal term of reference, a legal document. Some people say absolutely it is, and some people say absolutely it isn't. All you can do for yourselves is presume it can be, so therefore you mitigate or you can try and control that. Cases have ended up in court where one party is there, they're defending an action, or they might be trying to sue somebody or whatever it might be, and they don't know that the other party has actually got an email that one of their employees sent that they're not aware of. That employee might have left the organisation, but because the other party's received something and they can prove it, then it completely disempowers their case. There was one company that provided materials for construction, and there was a lot. They were arguing about back charges. Oh, you were late for this, you were late for that. And this employee had sent an email to this company and so said, oh yes, apologies for this truck being late today. We've had servicing issues and we didn't have a driver that turned up. Now, the company didn't know that that had been sent. But when they actually started arguing about back charges in court, they were able to say to the judge, well, this is the excuse from the company we received at the day that it was their problem, not ours. Whereas the original company was saying, no, we made the delivery on time, your cranes weren't ready, we had to wait, our vehicles were tied up, and so therefore that can actually completely change the outcome of a court case. So communications and how you allow communications to go out is a really big one. Obviously, the people that are going to receive communications or generate communications or participate as part of the communication chain will all be listed on your stakeholders register, because that will include everybody, all your clients, all the people that are going to be impacted by it, the whole lot. So that stakeholders register will come back into play time and time again throughout your project. And if you find new people that you hadn't thought about before, you need to go back and add them. Obviously, to be able to communicate with them, you need to know how they prefer to be communicated with and what they want to know about. So you need to be quiet, you need to have those discussions with the stakeholders at the beginning of the project so you make sure you know that you're giving them what they want and not just giving them information which is annoying them because they don't want to see it. So we have to understand their relationship to determine their requirements, but you also have a fairly informal and a formal means of communication. Usually internal resources within a project, you will have things like emails, informal chats, telephone communications, etc. But if you had a government department or you had a client that's an external stakeholder, then you would actually have structured formal communications where you send them out a report once a week, once a month, or whatever it is that you're going to do so that they know what's going on. So this is what I was talking about before, as in the who talks to whom in a project. If you have team members, you will normally allow them to talk freely to the other team members of, if you are working for your organisation, you've got a client, you would allow them to talk freely between one another in any means you want them to. But if you want them to talk to, if somebody needs to talk to the project manager or to the project sponsor of the client, you would not normally allow them direct access unless it was on permission. They wouldn't have free-for-all access, otherwise you don't know who's going to say what to what, who's going to say what to whom, and end up getting you into a difficult situation. Similarly, if you've got an external stakeholder like a government department, you would have a representative, you would identify who was going to communicate with that representative. If you ever have the need to manage a project where you're dealing with the media, you have to be so careful. They can say anything they like. You can say that wall over there's purple, they will print that it was green, and then they will argue that you never said there was a colour purple in existence. So you need to make sure that anything like that, you are just so careful. Don't trust anybody in the nicest possible way, because if you do, then the wrong thing will be said in the wrong context and you'll bear the brunt of it. Okay.